I quietly left after discovering my wife's affair 3.5 years into our marriage. A year later, my ex-wife, who had ghosted me, tracked me down after hearing about my wife's adultery. I had moved to the hills, and I'm not sure why I'm writing this, but maybe it will be helpful to someone now that the incident is behind me and I've moved on. After 3.5 years of marriage, I found out about my wife's affair in February 2018. I worked a contract job that sometimes required a lot of travel, but also allowed me to work from home. I had just returned as a director of a technical sales company, and my wife held a well-paying position. Although things had become strained because of her longer hours and my travel, we still had what I considered a good marriage. 5 years ago, at a cookout hosted by a mutual friend, I met my wife, who is now my ex. We immediately hit it off, and honestly, I felt like I was lucky to be with such an attractive and articulate woman. My rough-around-the-edges demeanor seemed to appeal to her. After a few weeks of dating, we were completely smitten. When we met at each other's apartments, things heated up quickly. After 18 months of dating, we got married and moved into a large apartment while saving for a home. Things started to change after our first 3 years of marriage. Even though I still loved her, I noticed she would argue over small things. When I mentioned her late hours and frequent work outings, she became irate. As she moved up in her career, she claimed that working long hours was just part of paying her dues. She also told me that since I traveled often, I had no right to challenge her. In reality, I was only taking vacations every 3 or 4 weeks for about 3 or 4 days at a time. I assured her that I could easily cut back on my travel, but these arguments never led anywhere, and I now realize I was unaware of her affair. Aside from our declining sex life and her late nights, I had no reason to suspect anything. I assumed she was just exhausted from her job, but constantly being rejected when I tried to initiate intimacy took a toll on my ego. She had a work phone and probably used it for personal texting, but I never saw the secret of texting that I'd read about in articles. She used our spare bedroom as an office and spent a lot of time there. By September 2017, Kathy started coming home late from work and then heading out to work events. What began as 1 night a week grew to more than 3 nights a week. While I'm not naturally jealous, I could tell she was being noticed by others. I knew that, working with so many male CEOs, she would need to turn down advances from some of them. She always seemed to be focused on her work. The first time I suspected she was cheating was about a month before the day everything came to light. She had made a quick stop at the supermarket and asked me to help with the grocery shopping. As I was retrieving some items from the back seat of her car, I noticed something pink glinting from beneath the front passenger seat. It was a bra. I recognized it immediately. It was hers, as she preferred bras from a particular store. Looking back, I see now that this was a warning sign. She always took off her bra first when she was feeling especially lustful. I don't know why, but when I saw it, I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't understand why it was beneath the seat, and I didn't say anything about it. My heart was pounding so hard I nearly passed out. When I returned to the kitchen with the bags, Kathy noticed and asked how I was feeling, commenting that I looked like I had seen a ghost. I simply ignored her comment and did my best to conceal my emotions. It took everything I had to keep my composure, but I tried not to appear upset or deceived. That night, I decided to find out if she was seeing someone. The next day, I thought back on all the things I might have missed. Other than the bra, I had no concrete evidence. She worked in an office downtown, and we lived in a large city. I decided to temporarily push the idea of an affair out of my mind and focus on giving her more of my attention. I prepared a nice meal and set the dining table with elegant plates, silverware, and candles. One Friday after work, I bought flowers and a bottle of wine. I proudly showed her the dinner I had prepared when she arrived, breezing in as usual after work. She apologized and told me she had to go meet some co-workers at a neighborhood hangout. She said she needed to take a shower first, but could have a quick snack with me before she left. I went silent, my insides twisted, And I don't even know how to describe the anger I felt at that moment, but I had had enough. While she was in the shower, I threw my work phone in the back seat of her car. I had been considering using my phone to track her. Afterward, I walked into the kitchen and threw the food and flowers in the trash. When she got out of the shower, she looked stunning, as always. "All right, let's eat," she said. But I replied, "Never mind, go out with your friends." She asked if I was angry, giving me a strange look. "I'm sad that you never want to do anything with me," I said. She got upset and sarcastically commented on my short fuse, telling me to stop acting like a child. I muttered, "Foolish me," as I stood there, letting everything sink in. I had hoped we would spend the evening together, but she just gave me a sly smile and stormed off. I pulled out my second phone and began tracking my work phone. I followed her to a bar about 20 minutes away. It was the place she often visited with her co-workers. I saw her car in the parking lot, so I waited across the street, watching to see if I could spot her. I felt like a stalker, but I told myself I needed to calm my fear and find out where she was. About an hour later, I saw her leaving the bar with a man. He looked like an executive from her company. He pulled her close and kissed her on the lips. My body went numb and my stomach clenched. They got into another car together, and I followed them as they drove to a hotel 10 minutes away. I parked on the street beside the hotel, watching them hold hands as they entered. That was enough for me. I felt foolish. I started pounding the steering wheel with my fist. Something inside me went completely blank. I'm not sure if I blacked out or had an out-of-body experience, but when I came to, I felt like I needed a drink. My life had taken a turn I never could have imagined. I began driving out of town, replaying what I had just seen. I was crying from both anger and betrayal. As much as I hate to admit it, I ended up at a small tavern about 30 miles away. I walked in, ordered a drink, and sat at the bar. The bartender, a woman, looked at me and said I looked like someone had taken the wind out of my sails. I guess I looked awful because she said I looked like death warmed over. I half smiled and said, "You could say that." A man sat down beside me and struck up a conversation, but I wasn't really in the mood for talking. I wasn't in the mood to talk, but there was something about this guy that made me feel at ease. We started a conversation, and before long, my wife's infidelity came up. I confided in him that all I wanted was to get away from her and forget about everything. "You're not alone, buddy," he said, giving me a sympathetic pat on the back. I went through that a few years ago. I think there's a reason why these things happen. You're at a crossroads now. Your life can go either way, but the choice is completely up to you. His words, for some reason, snapped me out of my despair. Even though I was hurting, I knew he was right. I had always tried to look at things rationally, and his advice was clear. We introduced ourselves. His name was Ray. He had this down-to-earth vibe that I liked, even though he seemed more like a country guy. "Are you going to move out?" he asked. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. My body was in fight-or-flight mode, and I knew I couldn't stay in that toxic environment. "I've got an idea," Ray said, his tone more serious now. "I feel for you, man. When the time comes, I have a mobile trailer on my land. It might need some work, but it's a place to get away, clear your head. Why don't you come take a look and see if it's something you could imagine living in for a while? I'll give you a good deal on it, and you could even park it on a nice piece of property I own. Maybe it would help you escape this mess." The bartender, who had been quietly listening in on our conversation, chimed in. If I could have gotten away from my crazy ex-husband, I would have jumped at the chance to live in a trailer or anything, just to get my head straight. It sounded almost too good to be true, but for some reason, it felt like what I needed. Maybe I was in some weird mental fog, but I felt like this could be the escape I'd been craving. "Yeah, I'll think about it and come by to check it out," I said to Ray. After a while, we parted ways and agreed to meet up in a few days. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had some hope. I had an opportunity to get out of the situation that had consumed me. That evening, when I got home, Kathy asked where I'd been. I went to grab some drinks, I answered, trying to sound casual. Then I asked her directly, "Are you having an affair?" She looked surprised, but quickly regained her composure. "No. Why would you ask that?" "I heard you might be seeing someone at work," I said, not revealing my source. "Who told you that?" she asked, defensive. "I know someone," I replied, withholding any further details. She dismissed it as ridiculous, accusing me of being drunk and crazy. She then asked, "Where are we going tonight?" "We're going to a bar with some friends," I said, trying to stay calm. Despite her obvious desire to ask more, she turned and went to bed. Now that I had proof of her infidelity, I decided to sleep on the sofa. I couldn't sleep at all, though. I kept imagining her in bed with him, and the feelings of disgust and betrayal twisted in my gut. But then I remembered Ray's trailer. The thought of escaping to a place of my own, away from all this chaos, gave me a glimmer of hope. Despite everything, I didn't want to be around Kathy anymore. Cheating was something I could never tolerate, and it was clear I needed to get out. The fight-or-flight instinct had kicked in, and the flight option was all I could focus on. The next morning, we barely spoke, and the weekend passed by like any other. I made plans to meet Ray in a few days. When I arrived at his ranch, I was impressed. The trailer was a decent size, about 26 feet long and fully furnished. It reminded me of a fun spring break trip I took with friends in college. Ray agreed to the price I offered, and after getting the trailer, I drove over to his ranch property. It was a peaceful area with hiking paths and plenty of trees. He had a small cabin overlooking the property, with electricity and water available for the trailer. Ray promised to set it up for me and move it to the location. It seemed like the perfect getaway from all the chaos I'd been living in. For the next few weeks, I tried to get Kathy to admit to her affair, but all I got was more gaslighting. I even warned her bluntly that if I found out she was cheating, there would be no going back. She only became more entrenched in her lies, accusing me of being insane and unreasonable. I almost laughed at how ridiculous her denials were. I regretted not taking pictures of them together, but without concrete evidence, I was stuck. At that point, I realized I couldn't continue in this marriage. The emotional turmoil was unbearable, and I knew I needed to move on. Instead of confronting Kathy directly, I decided to leave. I was done. I began quietly planning while Kathy was at work. Little by little, I started removing my belongings from the apartment and moving them into the trailer. At least I felt like I was taking action. During this time, Kathy seemed to be acting more polite towards me, but it felt like too little, too late. I needed a break as well. She continued going on company outings after work, and one night, as she was leaving, I got ready too. She glanced at me and asked where I was going. I simply said, "Meeting up with some friends." "You wouldn't enjoy all the shop talk, and you don't know them." She started to ask more questions, but I interrupted, just like she used to do when I asked to join her on her office outings. "All right, have a good time," she said, looking somewhat offended. "I definitely will," I replied. While working on the trailer and spending time with Rhea at the bar, I started feeling better. I also made the decision to cut back on my drinking. I knew better than to drown in self-pity, even though it would have been easy. One day, Kathy told me she'd be traveling for work the next week. She mentioned that the executive team and a few department heads were going. When I asked who exactly was going, I replied, "I hope you have a great time with your boyfriend," glancing at her. I immediately regretted saying that, as it sparked a heated argument. But as Rhea had told me, it didn't matter. I didn't need to know who the other guy was. Rhea said, "The fact that she chose to leave you is what matters. She destroyed the marriage, whether she admits it or not. The facts are the facts." It was hard not to agree with him. Kathy left for her trip, and I saw this as the perfect opportunity to move out completely. I packed up all of my valuable things, clothes, laptops, and personal equipment. I left behind the shared items and furniture. I left a note for her. It started as a long explanation, but in the end, I kept it simple. I hope it was worth it, I wrote, and placed my wedding ring on top of the note on the kitchen table. As I left, a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt free. The hurt would take time to heal, but this was the first step. I hadn't forced her to admit anything or screamed at her. I didn't need to. She had already disregarded everything. Our shared life, our dreams for the future. There was no going back. I owed her nothing. I hadn't planned anything, nor had I consulted a lawyer. I just wanted a fresh start. The air from the mountains was all I needed. I spent the next week running again, and it felt good to be alive. Kathy sent texts while she was away. Things like, "We just landed," "We're having a team dinner," and asking, "Where are you?" I didn't respond. She called and texted relentlessly when she got back, but I ignored her. Even her mother tried calling, but I didn't pick up. After a week of ignoring her, Kathy texted me, "What is this? We need to talk. I'm not sure what you think you know, but there's no affair. It was a mistake. I was waiting to end it." I had been expecting this confession, but it only made me loathe her more. Why couldn't she just be honest? She continued with more excuses. But I had already made up my mind. Errors don't last for months, or even a year. Her pleas for reconciliation became pathetic, but I refused to respond. I didn't want her to know where I lived, or to invade my peace. I changed my phone number and moved on with my life. In June 2018, I received an email from Kathy saying she had hired a lawyer and was filing for divorce. "Okay, that sounds good," I replied, without much thought. She followed up with a barrage of emails asking me to meet with her, but I didn't respond. She eventually stopped bothering me. After a few months of moving out and avoiding contact, I finally felt free. Kathy seemed to care more about closure than I did. Sure, there were moments when I thought about her, especially when I heard a song we used to enjoy. But eventually I stopped thinking about her. Fast forward to now. I'm officially divorced, and things are going great. I met an amazing girl who lives just down the hill. We clicked when I helped her fix a flat tire. She's a few years younger than me, but she's wonderful. She calls me her mountain man and loves my lifestyle. While I'm not rushing to commit, I'm definitely not giving up on women. And I have no plans of moving out of the trailer anytime soon. I find peace in being outdoors, and simplifying my life has made everything easier, grief included. It made it easier to handle everything, especially my ex-wife. I understand that everyone copes differently, but I was fortunate to have been married for only 3 years and not yet a parent. I truly believe I made the right choice for myself. You don't have to stay with someone who cheats on you. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, try not to dwell on it. Focus on your life and bettering yourself. It will get better in time. I wish everyone the best in life. I've rewritten this about 5 times to make it more readable, and now I just want to give you an update on my ex-wife situation. I had some concerns that she might be trying to find me. As I mentioned in my previous post, I left our old place, which was about 2 hours away. Then, last weekend, I unexpectedly ran into her at a coffee shop near my house. It didn't seem like a coincidence. Thankfully, I managed to slip away before she saw me. Update 3. This past weekend, I went into town to grab some groceries and stopped by my usual coffee shop to use their free Wi-Fi for some work. After finishing, I was walking out and heading to my truck when I heard someone call my name. I turned to find Kathy standing across the street, waving at me. It was like a moment from a movie, and I was completely stunned. She rushed across the street, and for a moment, I thought she might try to hug me. But instead, she extended her hand toward me. Without thinking, I raised my arms and stopped her. She seemed pained, then said, "I've been looking for you, Paul. I've wanted to talk to you ever since I heard you moved here. Can we have a conversation?" I felt trapped, like an animal in a cage, but I agreed. "All right, let's find a table and talk for a minute." I didn't want her anywhere near my home, so when she asked to come over, I firmly declined. We sat down at a bench by the street. She started by commenting on how much I had changed, my beard, my fitness level. She seemed to be trying to charm me, and I knew it. I had to keep my guard up and stay focused to see where this was going. She then apologized for the affair. She said that after I left, karma caught up with her. Her boss found out about it, and the situation became so uncomfortable that she ended up resigning. Her affair partner, who was engaged at the time, was transferred to a different department, and his fiancée learned the truth, which led to their breakup. Kathy bowed her head and started crying. I didn't say anything. I just looked around, trying to stay composed. She straightened up and stared at me. "What do you want from me?" I asked. She assured me that she wasn't intending to have an affair. According to her, the office politics and her affair partner's charm lured her in. She admitted she felt as if she was taking advantage of him just as much as he was of her. After I confronted her about cheating, she said she intended to end things. She drank to ease the guilt she felt, hating herself for what she had done. She said she felt incredibly stupid, lonely, and heartbroken after I left. She ended her relationship with her affair partner right after I walked away. Now, she was here, hoping to see if there was any chance of reconciliation. I stayed silent, just staring at her, and then I spoke up. "You have no right to come here and try to undo all the damage you've done. Do you think I'll just forget what you did to destroy everything we had?" I shook my head. "As I told you before, we're done. If you cheated, there is no forgiveness. This relationship is over. You destroyed it the moment you walked away. How foolish do you think I am? I watched as you walked into that hotel with him. Did you know that I saw?" I could tell people were beginning to notice how loudly my voice was getting. She grabbed my arm and started crying. After a while of letting her sob on my shoulder, I pushed her away. "I deserve all this," she said, looking up at me. "I'm certain that I do." "Would you allow me to take you out to dinner?" she asked. "I'd rather not," I replied. "But I would like to talk more. We need to be honest about everything. You need to spend more time with me than you have in the past, Paul. Please, I love you so much, even though I know you might not want to hear it. Before you left me, I had no idea how much I loved you. You broke me as much as I broke you. I can't forgive myself, and I don't think I will until the day I die." She began sobbing uncontrollably and hyperventilating. I lifted her up and hugged her, as it seemed like the only thing I could do to soothe her. I knew then that I had shattered her heart just as she had shattered mine. We walked to a peaceful spot to continue our conversation. Once she calmed down, I asked, "How did you find me?" She hesitated before answering. "No, I didn't hire a private investigator." She let out a small laugh and then added, "I ran into Stacy a few weeks ago." She didn't say anything at first, but I pushed her to tell me. I guess she thought it was a secret. But she finally told me you live somewhere close and came into town on your days off. I started coming here to check on you. I couldn't help but laugh. Damn, Stacy can't keep a secret. She blushed at that. We ended up having dinner at a charming little spot with a patio. I made sure not to order any alcohol. I didn't want to give her a reason to think she could be kind to me or to say she couldn't drive back. The conversation was good, and afterward, I walked her to her car. She insisted she hadn't dated anyone else since I left and swore I was the only one she wanted. She pushed me to stay longer, but I told her, no, it's still too soon for me to go down that road. She begged me to come back, but I didn't say yes. After I gave her my new email address, I didn't say anything else. When she asked for my phone number, I told her, you'll just blow it up with texts and calls. She cried, but eventually, she agreed to my decision. She promised to email me with details about returning to town the following weekend. Before she got in her car, I asked, would you have forgiven me if I had been the one cheating? Yes, in time, she said, pausing to think. But only if we saw a marriage counselor and worked through everything. Maybe even a binding agreement. After another pause, she added, all right, maybe I could do that in 5 or 10 years. I would wait if that's what it would take. I responded. She took both of my hands, looked me in the eye, and said, "God damn it, Paul. I will always love you. I'll do anything to prove it." Her words caught me completely off guard. As much as they upset me, they made me realize that even though she said it with conviction, I could not envision us reuniting. I felt better about the situation, but I couldn't even consider her as a friend at that point. Maybe someday, but not now. When I returned home, I went for a long run, had a beer, and reflected on how far I'd come. Could someone please assure me that she wouldn't destroy the peace I had finally found? I had the luxury of time to think about it, but it was still too fresh in my mind. This is likely my last update. When I first shared my story on Reddit, the moderators kept removing it. To summarize, I ghosted my ex-wife for over a year before she tracked me down. She wanted to make amends and start fresh. If you were hoping I'd forgive her and act like the typical blue pill guy, you'll be disappointed. She sent me a long email last week expressing her love and regret for the affair. She offered to come stay with me for the weekend. I shut her down. I told her I had no plans to reconcile. I'm completely happy living alone, enjoying my solitude, and keeping things simple. At 32, I'm not in a rush to make any big changes. I've enjoyed the company of a few women and friends, but I made it clear I wasn't interested in getting back with her. I didn't give her my phone number, telling her she'd just blow it up with messages. She was annoyed by my response and admitted that she had taken a job offer in a different state. Her plan was for me to join her, assuming my remote work would make it easy. She wanted to start over somewhere new with me, so she planned to visit me before her move. Luckily for me, I had a week of business travel scheduled. I'm relieved that I won't have her in my life anymore. She'll soon realize that her time with me is over, but I expect a few more emails. She'll need to find someone else, and I'm sure she'll end up cheating on them too. To anyone reading this, make the most of your life. Let go of the past and give yourself the strength to move on. Good luck to all of you. Thank you for reading. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories.